Sunday, the 6th of September 2020, and I am continuing to read the third part now of chapter 7, entitled Revelations. I made this chapter a little bit shorter because they are generally very long, still too long for one reading. The book is Prelude to the Landing on Planet Earth, and it is written by Stuart Holroyd, and it was published in 1977. And it is a book which is actually written previous to the book I also read aloud, which is The Only Planet of Choice, which I thought was fascinating, and then started to read this one aloud because I think it is very relevant to our times today in September 2020. This is actually about the relationship of the three main characters of this book, and there had been some jealousy and some discussions about jealousy because there were some people in the circle who were not up to no good, really. So the chapter, the second part ends with, "Well, how about yourself?" Andrija retaliated, and the subsequent discussion must have become even more personal and recriminatory, because the recording ends abruptly at this point, and that's where I stopped. This material is relevant to the study of the communications, I would suggest, because it is highly revealing, both as regards the psychology of the three and their relationship, and as regards their attitudes to Tom and the Nine, who are the Council of Nine, who speak to help humanity during all this time between the 70s and 90s. Though Andrija doesn't like some of the things the management have said, and though he regards Phyllis as too disposed to indulge her personal emotions, he doesn't suggest that the material she has channeled has been influenced by those emotions. At this point in time, he preferred to think that the Nine were wrong about some physical matters, that on their own admission they did not fully understand the physical. The communication held the day after this discussion constitutes further weighty evidence of the independent reality of Tom, for the intelligence, objectivity and breadth of view expressed in it are greater than we could expect any member of the trio to manifest, particularly in the light of what we have learned of them through eavesdropping on their discussions. Tom said, "We were saddened and we were grieved when we saw the great discord amongst the three of you. The sadness we feel is because there's so much difficulty among all in the manner in which you communicate. We have observed that what you speak is often not what you think. It is tragic that your manner of communication is used in this way. The day when all can see clearly what is in truth in the mind of another will be of the greatest importance, because then no one will speak in a manner that is not of truth. Misunderstanding is a different thing. We realize that at times you misunderstand what we say, just as you sometimes misunderstand each other. But when one thing that must not be misunderstood is that when we speak to you, we speak through this being Phyllis. And perhaps if you would understand the manner and the difficulties of our communications, it would be the foundation of future understanding." Andrija said that the manner in which the Nine communicated was indeed a mystery and that he would welcome more information about it. Tom proceeded to give a very informative and lucid talk on the subject of channeling, which was not only interesting but also opportune, and it was not interesting but also opportune. Sorry about that. For it had the effect of establishing Phyllis as a just a minute. Excuse me. Misunderstanding is a different thing. We realize that at times you misunderstand what we say, just as you sometimes misunderstand each other. But one thing that must not be misunderstood is that when we speak to you, we speak through this being Phyllis, and perhaps if you would understand the manner and the difficulties of our communications, it would be the foundation of future understanding. Andrija said that the manner in which the nine communicated was indeed a mystery, and that he would welcome more information about it. Tom proceeded to give a very informative and lucid talk on the subject of channeling, which was not only interesting but also opportune, for it had the effect of establishing Phyllis's uniqueness as a channel at a time when Andrija might have been prevailed upon to doubt it. Tom began, "In many thousands of years of communications from other dimensions to species and beings upon the physical planet Earth, there has always been great difficulty. There have been but few that permit complete control. Without complete control and without the relinquishing of the personality of the individual, there cannot be clear communication. The one whom we communicate through is in truth a physical transmitter, and it has to be a being that is willing, that will become passive in order for us to be active. We have said to you before that this being is the greatest of the communicators, and we wish you to understand that this is because this being, Phyllis, removes of the individual. In order to communicate with you, we must take over the subconscious of the being and at the same time control the physical body. We must, with great effort, maintain a balance in the body. We must cause the body to have its heart operating, its lungs breathing, and all its major organs functioning. The reason for the drain of energy many times from the two of you is that we are maintaining the body in a suspended state. When we maintain the being, it is as if we take a million threads and we weave these threads together to communicate with you. If there is a situation in which the being is not physically in condition, if, for example, there is a difficulty of digestion or of elimination or difficulty in emotion, or if there is a negative vibration within the being or either of you, or an anger or a disturbance in you, we cannot then use the energy from you because it would only cause a breakdown in the threads which we weave with the being in order to communicate. So therefore, we communicate at times with great effort, which in turn causes more of a depletion in the being Phyllis. It is also very difficult when conditions are not proper to present the images so that they may be related. For you must understand that we do not have a vocal language and we have to communicate with the mind of the being. And it is the being's subconscious that translates our communications into words. We have told you before, and we will tell you again, to be of extreme caution with those who use you as communicators. It is important for you to understand that this being is upon the physical planet Earth, the only one to give completely to the nine. Communications with you which you receive through other species or beings are of a different sort. They are relayed. You must also understand that the conscious mind of others may desire to use you. We have asked of you, Doctor, to be cautious of communications through other channels. We are again giving to you not a warning, for we do not warn you, we alert you. So we are giving you an alert, for although the civilization that speaks through them may be trying with great difficulty to relay a truth to you, for them it presents an opportunity to use you. Is there any reason why this kind of deception goes on? Andrija asked. Are they the opposition or the others, or are they the misinformed, or what? Tom said, it is a consequence of their physical nature. We wish you to know that the most destructive element, and we have talked to you about this before, is the ego that controls. It is true that all three of you have what you would call a giant ego, but one thing is clear with the three of you, and that is your commitment is true. Your ego does not create difficulty when we communicate. It has sometimes caused difficulty within the cage when you have brought with you your anger and your problems of dealing with each other. But this is different from the ego of ambition and manipulation. We say this to you, and we speak now to you, the Doctor, because in truth we are in Armageddon, and this is one area the opposition may use, even though the communicator may not be aware. Do you understand? Yes, Andrija said, that is very serious. Tom continued, we just ask you to be responsive to souls. If you are responsive to souls, we will take care of the rest. You are ambassadors for us. We have asked you before to remember who you are, and that it would behove you to act as the Nazarene. Do as he would do. You have, the three of you, the most difficult of assignments. You have a special mission, but you are not special. You are no different from any other physical being. The reason for this is that it is important for you to understand their difficulties. It is important for you not to withdraw from the common folk, for it is they who will hear the message and of whom the demands will be made. When we say that you are no different, we mean in your feelings, your emotions and your sufferings. The common man must exist upon this physical planet with all its hurt, all its sorrow and all its joys. And this is the existence of you three also. You choose this existence so that you could relate to the common man. And in this area the being is of the three of you the most able and is your teacher. Our doctor and Sir John, as in other areas, you are her teacher. Andrija wasn't too happy with this last statement, and he pointed out that he had been born in the slums, had served in the army and had worked for years among simple people doing medical work. Tom said, "But you are superior in mind. They look upon you as someone special. They tell you only the things you wish to know. They do not tell you their deepest feelings. You are two different beings. You can, from a clinical position, understand the common man, but you are, and you know this, superior." Andrija proceeded to bring the discussion back to the subject of channeling with a question that brought an interesting answer from Tom. "It might help us to understand what you were saying about the problems of communication, and if you could give us an idea as to who in the past, amongst known historical figures, you would call perfect communicators, as you say this being Phyllis is." "Well, there was the one called Jesus of Nazareth. You know of him?" "Yes." "There was the one that you call Socrates. There was the one that gave you the code, that gave to you in code Nostradamus. There was the one that was one and the same as Jesus, Buddha. But remember this, there was perfect communication, and it was in translation that it became obscure. Of which figure are you speaking now?" Tom, "In all of the translations, then there was one, Elijah, and there was the one called Joseph." Andrija asked, "Which Joseph would that be? There are several in the Bible." Tom, "It would be the one that was in Egypt, and there was one whose name was Da Vinci. We speak to you only of those that have been recorded historically. There have been others." Andrija said, "To come to more recent times, would a figure like Henning Blavatsky qualify?" "I must consult," Tom said, and after a pause returned with the information Blavatsky was true. "Well, thank you," Andrija said. "That information answers a lot of questions. Before we go on, I have just one more along those lines. Who was it that received the communication that we call the revelation of St. John the Divine?" Tom had to consult again, and this time he returned with a question. "Would you be able to understand that it was John the Baptist?" "I would never have imagined that," Andrija said. "That really is a surprise." "It was before the baptism. It was that brought the understanding of who Jesus was." "And was Jesus witness to this revelation?" "Yes, he was a young boy." "And did he actually say this revelation to St. John, or did it come directly?" "It came as we speak to you," Tom said. It was later explained that after John the Baptist's death, the revelation was transmitted by him to St. John the Divine, who received it as a vision while in exile on the land of Patmos. Through the powers of the opposition, though the powers of the opposition were supposed to have diminished since October 1974, it was during these weeks of January and February that the balance and togetherness of the trio came under the severest pressure. It was perhaps the more severe for being pressure from within. In October they had rallied to withstand a common enemy, but there was no rallying against the more insidious enemy of this time, which was a disruptive force that drew its strength from their own egos, their resentments, their insecurities, and their pride. 2 years later, looking back on the big scene between Phyllis and Andrija, in which he had acted as mediator, John said, "I thought that Phyllis's emotion had as much right to be heard as Andrija's opinions. But at the same time, my mediating wasn't perhaps as selfless and as balanced as it might seem. For one thing, I felt some guilt, because in the past, I'd done what Andrija was doing now and had not paid attention to Phyllis's emotion, and to an extent I was compensating for that. But also I didn't want to fall into disfavor with Andrija, because I regarded him as an ally, so there was an element of self-interest in my playing the middle of the road." John's own crisis occurred at the beginning of February. They had agreed to split up for a short while so that John could spend some more time with Diana in the Bahamas, and Phyllis could go and see her daughters in Florida. And the last session they had before John's departure had a dramatic conclusion. John, no less than Andrija, had balked at Tom's statement that, in certain respects, Phyllis was their teacher, and also in the last weeks he had been repeatedly irritated by certain aspects of Phyllis's conduct. "I was very much into the idea of community living," he later explained, "and sometimes the way Phyllis insisted on doing her own thing and set herself apart really got up my nose." As if exasperated by observing their interpersonal conflicts, Tom said, "We cannot impress on the three of you the importance of what we say. When there is a difficulty amongst you, it is more serious than the difficulty that would arise amongst others. Your energies are of a different nature, and if they cannot be in balance, they will be the destruction of the three of you. You must understand that if one of you is on a collision course, it affects all three. There is great anxiety amongst us. We do not wish to speak of bringing you back to us, but we want you to be clear that now there are but three choices. First, we can remove the being Phyllis and return her home, and that will leave the two of you. Second, we can remove the being Phyllis from the two of you and still have her in physical existence, so that her energy would still be available for us or the civilization of Altea to use. Or we can keep the being with the two of you, which is in truth the situation which you originally chose. As we have told you, when the three of you are together and in harmony, this creates a perfect unit which, because of the power that comes through you, can prevent catastrophes. It is your choice, we cannot interfere. We give you the three." Andrija recalled that in earlier communication Tom had said that sometimes Phyllis served as a thorn to goad himself and John, and he asked, "Is this part of your plan?" "No," Tom replied. "When we said that she was a thorn, it was from observation. It is difficult for the two of you to accept that the being Phyllis sees to the core of the truth of a situation. It is not always a situation that she understands, and she is not always aware that she sees the truth, and it's difficult for her, as it is for you, to understand how she knows. When we said she was a thorn, it was because we realized that the being knows the truth upon immediate communication with us, with other people. It is not always the truth that they would recognize in their own mind. It is the truth of what is the truth." This claim for Phyllis's infallibility was very difficult for John to swallow in view of the dissensions they had had over the last few weeks. He mentioned that she had sometimes accused him of generating a negative energy, and he accepted that possibly he sometimes did, but he protested. "I cannot help but be aware that the being herself is sometimes the source of negative energy that affects not only me but others around here. This she doesn't seem to see at all, and this is possibly where our problem lies." Tom said, "We have just explained, and we will explain again. The being sees through the situation, immediately upon observation. Without thinking, she knows. You have said that there is a creation of negative energy. What we have explained to you is that the negative energy of which you are aware comes from what the being sees, though she knows not from where it comes. "So what you're saying is that she's perfect?" said John, a little irascibly. and that the negative energies all comes from other people and not from her? Tom: we did not say that. You're not perfect, the doctor is not perfect, and the being is not perfect. We have asked you to work in harmony, and if you allow others to implant in you a great disharmony, then you have done a great injustice to yourself and to the three. John said, well, may I just say this? I feel that you've quite rightly admonished me several times for my feelings of frustration and my shortness of temper with the being. But very often she produces those very same characteristics that you've admonished me for. And this is something I find very difficult to accept and deal with. And it's not as if it's me alone that has noticed this. I think there's a general feeling around here that she does not fit in, and she does tend to cause difficulties. John was externally being cool and reasonable, but a surge of violent anger welled up in him, and he later attributed to this the alarming and unprecedented thing that happened next. Tom interrupted him and said in a level voice, but with a chilling note of finality, we will remove the being. Instantly, Phyllis slumped out of trance, and for an awful moment John thought she was dead. That peremptory statement echoed through John's mind repeatedly during the days he was in the Bahamas. He phoned Andrija twice a day to see if there was any news of Phyllis from Florida, still fearing drastic consequences. To remove the being and return her home, Tom had said, was the first option available to them. The second was to remove the being from the two of you, so either was she to die or to stop working with them. Either eventuality would be catastrophic and was unthinkable, and John agonized over the thought that he had brought this situation about. He sat on the beach alone and went through harrowing hours of reprisal of himself, and of the extent to which his ego had caused the conflict with Phyllis. At first, he was unclear of how he had been so wrong, but he accepted that the nine knew best and that he would understand in time. He resolved that if the work with Phyllis continued, he would finally and unconditionally surrender his personal will to that of the higher purpose of the work. When John returned to Ossining after a few days, the news of Phyllis was encouraging. She was going to be back on the 25th of February 1975, but also John recalled that some time before, Tom had said that they would be in Israel again by the end of February, and he was apprehensive lest their interpersonal discord should have created a setback for the management's plans. It was a great relief for John to find in the first communication they held after Phyllis' return that nothing had substantially changed except within him. He and Andrija reaffirmed their dedication and readiness to work wherever the management required, and Tom said that as they were all in a low state and not fit for channeling the necessary energies, they should not go to Israel yet. The situation would hold a little longer, and meanwhile there were many things to be communicated. It was in this period, just before they went to Israel for the second time, that the subject of the Book of Revelations came up, and it was elaborated by Tom over a number of communications. I propose now to bring all this material together, but first would like to make a few points by way of preface. The material on the Book of Revelation is in many ways the most intriguing in all the communications, for the familiarity Tom shows with the text and the ingenuity he exercises in interpreting it raised and focused the basic problems posed by the communication as a whole. Do they emanate from the mind of one or other of the participants, or from a combination of them in psychic concert? Or are they explainable in terms of Phyllis's cryptomnesia, or of Andrija's telepathic projections? Are they a collusive whole? Or are they the product of an intelligence, or a combination of intelligences of unknown origin, endowed with extraordinary powers of invention and improvisation? Any member of the group might have been or become familiar with the text of Revelation, so a normal explanation, hoax, or a normal paranormal one, terror, telepathy, cryptomnesia, might be tenable. But close study of the material raises problems for these explanations. For Tom, sometimes explains the symbolism of revelation in terms consistent with information contained in communications channeled months before the book was first mentioned, which would seem to reduce the choice of explanations to two: brilliant improvisation or truth. The subject first came up when Tom volunteered the information that the opposition forces had been in control of the planet for the last 1,300 years. Andrija asked, was this foreseen in the book of the Bible that we call Revelation? Tom complimented him on his insight and said, there are messengers who reveal the nature of what is in the cosmos. Those that are of the opposition had until this time period. It did not matter if those upon the planet Earth evolved or did not evolve, but the fact that those that oppose have kept the planet in bondage makes Armageddon more difficult. So we're to understand that we chose to come back to be prepared for the moment when Armageddon started. Yes, Tom said. There are many obscure passages in Revelation, Andrija said. Could you clarify one that bothers me? After the sixth trumpet sound, there's the appearance of the two witnesses on earth. And it says that the two witnesses would go around in sackcloth for 1,260 days, and then they would be slaughtered by the mob, and their bodies would lie in the street for 3.5 days, unattended. Then they would get up and walk away. Is that the scenario? Tom said, it is not in the sense of a physical experience. You understand that the passages of the final book are in symbolic languages. Yes, of course, but what is the true interpretation of that symbolism? Tom, it is that the witnesses will not be understood. There will be great anger against them because they reveal what they are to reveal, and those who are acknowledgeable and recognize that they have the truth will live in great fear of them. And they will say that those that are coming to this planet, who you know are coming to save the planet, are coming to control it. Remember also that the time of what you call the Bible is a different time from your time. When it speaks of the rising, it is simply saying that the recognition then will be given, and they will come to the witness for help in understanding. It is true that they find that they will first strip them of their dignity, and that is the reason for the terminology. Andrija asked, will this occur before the landing? It will be after, was the answer. Andrija took a copy of the Bible into the next session they held and resumed his questioning. As history is unfolding now, where would you say we are in the book of Revelations? What chapter and verse are we actively living out right now on the earth and cosmic scene? I will consult, Tom said, and after a brief pause he gave the information. In your chapter number 6, and it is in your 5. Chapters 5 and 6, okay, just let me look that up. Andrija said, and when he found a place, he said, that has to do with the opening of the seals. Tom said, it is the 3rd. Andrija read out the passage about the opening of the 3rd seal, which is verse 5 of chapter 6. So Tom's reference was exact to the chapter and verse, and Andrija had at first misunderstood it, which in the revelation he had went as follows. When he broke the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd creature say, come, and there, as I looked, was a black horse, and its rider held in his hand a pair of scales, and I heard what sounded like a voice from the midst of the living creature, which said, a whole day's wage for a quart of flour, a whole day's wage for the 3 quarts of barley meal, but spare the olive and the vine. Tom said, there was an error in part of the translation, but not enough to cause a difficulty, Tom said. As you understand, the planet on which you are existing must now be brought into balance. The scale is a symbol of balance. If the earth is brought into balance, then the rest need not happen. So, it is in truth when it says to spare the olive and the vine, it is important that you understand that the month of your December 1971 was the beginning of the 1st seal. That would be the time when I was with Uri Geller in Israel, Andrija said. Was the awakening of Uri Geller the opening of the 1st seal? Tom said, in a sense. And Andrija read out the symbolism of the first seal. I saw a white horse and its rider held a bow. He was given a crown and he rode forth conquering and to conquer. In explanation of this, Tom said, "You must understand what in fact happened in 1971. It was the beginning of the arrangements for the coming of Jehovah. You understand about the Huvits?" "Yes," Andrija said, "that's beautiful. I'm really grateful to you for giving us these explanations." Tom continued, "You must also understand that in the Book of Revelation, each of the seals depends upon the completion or non-completion of the one before. If you can bring into harmony and into understanding the peoples of the planet Earth, it will be not necessary for the fourth seal." "I see," Andrija said. "Then presumably the 7 trumpets would not have to be blown. I mean, the trumpets of the 7 angels all spell disaster for Earth and man." "That is correct," Tom said. "And there's obviously a timetable for the opening of the seals, and there's one verse that seems to indicate the start of the final phase. It is the first verse of chapter 8. Now, when the Lamb had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets." The way I understand this now, Andrija continued, is that we complete the work we're doing before, or at the time of the 7th seal, then the first trumpet will not have to sound. Yes, this is what we explained. So it's impossible to overemphasize how important it is that the 3 of us strive for perfection. Tom: "Yes, but may we say this to you? We do not wish you to berate yourself looking for perfection. There is not perfection upon the physical planet, but the 3 of you together are a perfect thing. You must understand that by the 3 of you just being, we are, and that by the 3 of you being together and being in harmony, all things may be done. We do not ask you to do any particular thing if you are in harmony, because one perfect being can bring it all into balance, and the 3 of you can make one perfect being." The number 7 is central in the symbolism of the Book of Revelations. In one of the first communications with Tom in the Bahamas in June 1974, the group had learned that they were the primary hub of a worldwide plan and organization consisting of groups of 7 working in different areas. In a number of other communications over the months, they had also learned that they would eventually have 6 co-workers. The apparent anomaly was now elucidated in a communication of 3 weeks after the one quoted above. Tom: "There are 7, and we wish you to understand this. We have explained to you before that the 3 of you are one, and that there will be 6 others. This is a core, and it is no more than 7. 6 and the 3 make 7, and at the same time make 9. If you review your Book of Revelation, we ask you to review particularly chapter 2, because in truth the 7 are the 7 angels." Andrija said, "Excuse me, but there are the 7 churches and the 7 angels." Tom: "That is true. The angels are the 7 that will relate to the churches. The churches are different areas of beings and people, and it is as if you were in the center, and you had under you 6 pillars, and these pillars were giving you strength and supporting you. Do you understand that for the 3 of you to be complete here upon the planet Earth, you need 6 supports?" "No, we didn't realize that," Andrija said. "We asked you to review and to study your Book of Revelation. There are many truths and there are many symbols, but there are more truths than there are symbols. We ask you to review and to have in your heart the openness to understand the verse 19 to 22 of chapter 2. "Well, we'll do that right after the session," Andrija said. "While we're talking about numbers, what does the book refer to when it speaks about God sitting on a throne, surrounded by 4 beasts and 24 elders? Is this a literal situation or is it symbolic?" "It is a symbolism. The 4 beasts are the 4 corners of your world. Your north, your south, your east, and your west. The 24 elders are of the civilizations. Do we deal with any of these civilizations? I'm thinking of Althea, Hoover, Aragon, Ashland. Tom, these are amongst the civilizations and they are part of the lower council. Andrija said, I see. Now, for my own interest, I'd like to ask about a passage in chapter 10, the 11th verse. Speaking about the angels, it says, Then they said to me, once again you must utter prophecies over peoples and nations and languages and many kings. Now it seems clear to me that this means that John the Baptist comes back and has to utter prophecies. Tom, are you not a proclaimer? Well, yes. My question is, when is this process to begin? Because according to this text, it comes after the 7 trumpets, which we now understand may not have to be sounded. Tom explained, you must understand that this also involves what you call the Battle of Armageddon. The trumpets would be in the spheres. If you complete what you have to complete, that area will not affect the physical planet Earth. Then you would be a witness in explaining the nature of what has happened and how close the people came. The 2nd chapter of Revelations contains messages to 4 of the 7 churches, and in the authorized version, the specific verses referred to by Tom read as follows. I know your works, your love and faith and service, and that your latter works exceed the first. But I have this against you, that you tolerate the woman Jezebel, who calls herself as prophetess, and is teaching and beguiling my servants to practice immorality, and to eat food sacrificed to idols. I gave her time to repent, but she refuses to repent her immorality. In view of the interpersonal conflicts that were going on or sinning at this time, and the discussions in the communication on the subject of authentic channeling, there is certainly no ambiguity about the relevance of this passage. Furthermore, it constitutes convincing evidence against the Andrija as telepath explanation of the communications, for Andrija would surely not produce, either consciously or subconsciously, a reference so pertinent to a situation that he vehemently denied even existed. When Andrija introduced the subject of the quotation in the course of the next session, Tom immediately said, Are you at this time of an open mind and without anger? Yes, Andrija said. We wish to speak to you, but before we do, we ask you to remember who you are, and to be guarded and forgiving. We have tried many times to nudge you gently, but now we have decided not to nudge you, but to speak directly. There is one among you, and we speak not of among the 3, but in your home, that has been a catalyst that started the whirlpool that removed one from the aura of us. Andrija and John knew immediately that Tom was referring to Colette. When they had been away in Israel, something had happened between her and another of the psychics living in Ersinning, who had now left. Listen carefully to what we say, Tom continued. There is nothing clever in this universe that one that is looking for control of others. But remember, we do not work with those that are not disciplined. Such beings and species are used by civilizations, some of which are in service to us, but most of which are not evolved. Do you in your heart believe that a sophisticated civilization would use a being or species that is not stable? The tragedy of your planet Earth is that throughout the years this situation has existed and has created great problems in that our work and your forerunners' work and the work of others has been discredited because of a lack of stability. And remember that there are civilizations also that have ambitions. You are aware that the world that exists immediately around your planet is the spirit world, and that there are those in the spirit world that claim to be different than they are. Well, It is the same with the civilizations. Andrija interrupted. May I say something? May I just say, you must be more direct with me. You know who you are speaking about. We know who you're speaking about, and we want the truth. So come out with it directly. Don't treat me like a child. Tom reminded him, we asked you not to be disturbed with us when we spoke to you of this. I'm not disturbed, I want the truth. Specifically, is the woman lying? We are explaining to you, our doctor. Well, be directly, please. Be more direct. Don't give us these long-winded stories, Andrija said vehemently. Tom waited for his vehemence to subside, and after about half a minute said, May we speak now? Andrija said yes, and he continued. Tom, you have many interpretations of your book. The essence is there, but there were times when there was an error made here and an error made there, as it was handed down, and it was translated from language to language. Parts were lost and parts were misguided. Now that what we say to you was that when there is a spirit world, there are situations in which things are related, and there are those who say they are something that they are not, but they are receiving it perhaps at times from another source. This is not an answer to my question, Andrija interrupted. Is the woman lying? Andrija, Tom, she does not understand. This is why we have a great... Is she lying or not? Say yes or no. You're beating about the bush. We are not beating. Can a species or a being lie when they do not know what is in themselves? This is what we have tried to explain to you. Andrija, you suggested she's on a power trip, therefore she's lying. Andrija, seemingly losing his logic as well as his temper. Tom said, we have explained to you very patiently that it is a manipulation by other civilizations, and also that she in truth does not know. This was in fact, a perfectly clear and direct answer to Andrija's question, but he was not prepared to acknowledge it as such. He adopted another line of attack. May I say something very bluntly to you, please? May I speak to you very directly and honestly? Yes. A year ago, the being, Phyllis, that sits before me did not know that you were speaking through her. She thought she was a spirit. She thought it was a spirit. She exercised Bobby. She made all these mistakes. How do I know she's not making a mistake now in what she is transmitting to me? Can you prove that to me? Tom, what would you like to have as proof? Tom asked, but Andrija burst out. When I say something, would you simply say it is a lie or it is not a lie? You give me all these phony stories that leave us all confused. Don't you see how confused we are? If the woman's false, say she's false and we'll throw her out. But this way, we're not getting at the truth and you are not being fair to me. Tom said, will you understand that we are attempting? Andrija gave up and asked John to continue the conversation. John said he thought it would be best to drop the subject and discuss it between themselves afterwards. Tom said that perhaps Andrija now understood why they hadn't spoken to him directly before. I can take any amount of straight talking, Andrija said. What I can't stand is all this bullshit. John said, Andrija, it may not be bullshit if we explore it. I'm trying to explore it, but I just don't get answers, Andrija says. If they spoke clearly, there wouldn't be any ambiguity. John, well, to me there isn't any ambiguity, Andrija. So let you and I discuss it. Tom, we will leave now, and we leave you with love, and we leave you with peace, and we will return at your convenience. Love and peace, John said, and Andrija echoed love and peace, the words rather wearily. This was not a mere ephemeral fit of temper on Andrija's part, but a genuine crisis of confidence. He shut himself away in his room for 2 days, and would allow no one to see him. In the evening of the second day, John held a communication alone, and at the beginning of it, Tom said, It is a sad time when one of us in isolation must go through our own purgatory. But each of us has been in that state of consciousness. It is the one aspect of your physical existence that we understand, because it is not in truth part of your physical existence, but part of your soul existence. Each of us must evolve within ourselves, and we must resolve within ourselves our crises and difficulties. I was wondering what to do about the doctor's feeling that this being is distorting the channeling, John said. I'm very anxious that we should re-establish his confidence in her. Distortion is not possible, for the being is not in control, Tom said. In time all will be proven, and the truth will be made known within the soul of each of you. So there's nothing particular we can do. You can only love as we love, Tom said. Yes, of course, we do that. Tom, may we say that the greatest sorrow in the doctor is because he feels that he has been tricked, and it is his pride that is hurt. He has in fact not been tricked, either by the channel or by us. There is no black and there is no white. As we explained at the time of the communications, he must hold in his heart forgiveness and understanding, and he must remove from himself the resentment he holds against the people who do not live up to his principles. And when we say this, we do not speak of either the channel or this being, but we speak of the being called Yuri and of others. It is only in forgiving that they are returned. Tom went on to explain that Andrija's going through his personal purgatory was a thing that was essential to the continuation of the work, and he did so in terms consistent with the general philosophy expounded in earlier communications. Tom, many of our communications ago, we explained to you that to be all positive is as senseless as to be all negative. And we also explained that the opposing forces and the negative vibrations are more powerful because they operate on emotions which temporarily create more strength than positive emotions. Because a positive emotion is a feeling and a true manifestation of love. And love is peace and calmness. It is joy within the heart, and it is steady. In each soul, in order for that soul to be balanced, it must have both of these elements, of the positive and the negative. The emotions of anger, the emotions of hate, the emotion of bitterness, the emotion of fear are powerful, damaging, and devastating. But in order for a soul to evolve to a perfect balance, it must in its evolution go through all of these emotions. This time of the doctor's personal purgatory was necessary in order for him to bring the other side of himself into balance and for our work to continue. This was another part of chapter 7, which is called Revelations, and it is indeed very revelationary. There is going to be another part of a few pages which will follow soon. Lovely Sunday.